As Parliament resumes, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre gave a speech to his caucus that a Tory government would never reinstate funding for UNRWA. That's the UN agency that provides aid for Palestinians. The Trudeau government is only pausing Canadian aid there right now. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, what prompted the change and the pause? Does it have something to do maybe with those who were involved in the October 7th attacks in Israel?
Yeah, look, the Trudeau government was warned before they reinstated funding in 2016. The Harper government had gotten rid of it due to the absolutely well-documented, multifaceted ties between the UN Relief and Works Agency, which is what UNRWA stands for, and Hamas terrorists and other terrorist groups. And so the Harper government said, we're not going to fund a group that has so many links to terrorism. Trudeau came in 2016, and even though he was warned by officials, he was questioned about it by the media, said, oh no, we have assurances this is never happening again. So he reinstated funding, and since then, we've given them well over $200 million. Well, over the weekend comes out the report that at least 12 members of UNRWA employees, which means they're United Nations employees, took part in the terrorist attacks of October 7th. The Wall Street Journal has a report out today on their front page stating that 12,000 UNRWA employees, or 10% of their workforce, are active members of Hamas. And Canadian Hillel Muir, who runs the group UN Watch, has documented that there is an open Telegram channel where 3,000 UNRWA teachers are participants in celebrating the killings, the murders, the rapes, the attacks of October 7th. So, I mean, this should have been well known, but the Trudeau government has resisted calls to even review funding up until the United States said they were putting it on pause, joined by other countries, including Britain, France, Italy. The European Union, by the way, has said, we want our people to do an investigation. We don't trust you to do your own investigation. We want to appoint someone. If that happens, the rot within UNRWA, which I've been documenting for more than a decade, Hal, will be fully exposed. I can tell you that when I was in Israel last week, the two things that I heard over and over again is Hamas must be destroyed and dismantled, and also that UNRWA cannot be part of the future of Gaza or the West Bank going forward, because the people we spoke to across the political spectrum said UNRWA is Hamas, Hamas is UNRWA. There is no difference.
Brian, it appears as though the main issue that federal Conservatives are dealing with right now in the House of Commons is affordability, which is impacting millions of Canadians right now. What has Pierre Poilievre said about fighting back against the carbon tax?
Yeah, I mean, affordability touches on so many different issues, but one of the areas that he said he will fight on is the carbon tax, and he's going to renew his fight to get the remainder of the carbon tax taken off of farms and farmers. Now, the Trudeau Liberals say, well, 97% of what goes on a farm isn't subject to the carbon tax. But, the proposal by the Conservatives to take it off the remaining, we're told, would save farmers $1 billion over the next several years. As Poilievre keeps saying, if you tax the farmer that grows the food and the trucker that transports the food, then you tax everyone who eats the food. And we know what's going on with food affordability in this country. So he's renewing that. The Trudeau Liberals have fought this tooth and nail. They say it's not an issue. Well, talk to any dairy farmer who has to, heat their barns. They're not heating them to 22 degrees. It's not room temperature in a dairy barn, but there is some heating that goes on for dairy, for poultry, what have you, especially in the much colder parts of this country. Talk to grain growers who have to dry their grain using natural gas and ask them if they pay the carbon tax. The answer is absolutely they do. So he is going to continue this fight. I think the Liberals are going to try and continue to push back against it. And according to some reports that were out earlier today, the Trudeau Liberals know that they've got a problem with the carbon tax. So instead of getting rid of it, instead of changing it, they're going to try and rebrand it, because that's what it needs. It needs a better communication strategy, Hal. You just need to feel better about the fact that everything in your life is costing more due to this tax.
Needs a better PR team, right? Now, Brian, housing affordability remains a hot button issue, and it's one that the Trudeau government tried to attack Poilievre on last week. What happened?
So A new housing report came out showing that there was a big drop off in certain places, including drop offs of nearly 40% in both Quebec City and Montreal. So, despite the fact that Pierre Poilievre praised the mayors of Saguenay in northern Quebec, of Three Rivers or Trois-Rivières along the St. Lawrence, of Victoriaville, southeast of Montreal. Despite praising all those, he was critical of the mayors of Quebec City and Montreal, saying they're incompetent. They had these big housing drop offs. The other mayors were able to get housing going. Well, the Trudeau Liberals turned around and tried to use that as uh, an attack on Quebec. That it wasn't that Poilievre was being critical of them getting in the way of housing. It's an attack on Francophones, Hal. It's an attack on all Quebecers. He shows complete contempt for Quebec. They are playing ethnopolitics. We've talked before about how they went across Western Canada saying, see, they don't support Ukraine. This is an issue. They're doing the same thing here. They're playing ethno and language politics to try and drum up support because they're doing so badly in the polls. They have to grasp at any paper straw they can find.
Now, Brian, you say the Prime Minister is still being asked about his Jamaican vacation, but he just smirks and repeats a line. What line is that, and will this maybe cause some problems with voters?
I think it will cause some problems with voters. And David Coletto, the CEO of Abacus Data, who is one of the more active pollsters lately, I'm waiting for more polling firms to come out with numbers. But Abacus has been active lately. As I told you recently, back in mid-December, they had the gap closing down to just 10 points. And then just after New Year's, it opened back up to a 17 point. Now it's 15. So, it's still a huge lead no matter how you cut it. And Coletto said that he felt that the bad headlines around the PM's vacation were at least a contributing factor. He didn't say that's everything, but he said, it's not helping him. And I think that's right. But when Trudeau's questioned about this, and there are real questions about taking an $84,000 vacation from a friend and just saying, oh, don't worry about it, it's a friend. Well, when he's asked about it, he says, like a lot of Canadian families, we stayed with friends over Christmas. And then he smiles and just moves on. I'm sorry, none of us have friends with a Jamaican estate that rents out for 7,000 US dollars per night. Well, maybe some of your viewers do, but most of us don't. And if we did, and we were in a position of authority, guess what? We'd be questioned about it, and we should be. And as I've told you before, Hal, this is all due to Trudeau's own office and how they handled this. They told us at the beginning, the PM will pay for his own accommodation. Then just before he came back, the PM stayed at no cost at a location owned by friends. And then when people said, okay, well, which is it? These are two contradictory statements. They said, oh no, he stayed with friends. Well, again, which is it? You've told us three different stories and you won't clarify. And when asked, all you do is smirk and say, we stayed with friends. Yeah, like you're in the bedroom in the back of the basement that is kept for family staying over. That's not the case.
Now, new poll, Brian, as you mentioned, shows the Tories with about a 15-point lead over the Trudeau Liberals. But there's also talk right now, the polls are revealing that Trudeau's attempt to link Poilievre to Donald Trump is really not working. What are the polls showing in that regard?
Well, as I said, nationally, so this is an Abacus Data poll, the company I just mentioned. They questioned on both party support, but also, do you think Trump and Poilievre are the same? So on party support, it's nationally, it's a 15-point lead, 40% for the Conservatives, 25 for the Liberals, 20 for the NDP. The only place that the Conservatives aren't leading by a significant margin is Quebec. In Quebec, they're in third. So, enough to hold on to their 10 seats. So, you could say, oh, well, they were at 17, now they're at 15. That's margin of error stuff. That's, we haven't seen a trend line that shows that this is working. But as I've documented since late last year, they keep trying to do this. They want to campaign against Donald Trump in 2024 because he will be the Republican nominee. He will not be super popular with Canadians. Some like him, but not that many. But here's a couple of data points from the poll. When asked who would best handle a Trump presidency, 44%, I was about to say a majority, it wasn't, it was 44%, said Pierre Poilievre. 29% picked Trudeau. So Poilievre is, picked by a significant margin. Now, how do Canadians want the Canadian Prime Minister to handle Donald Trump if he's president again? And they say, stand up to him, which, given his protectionist measures on Canadian trade, on trade with Canada, absolutely. That's what any Canadian leader, whoever they are, should do with any protectionist American president. So, people think, well, we need someone that can stand up to him. Who's the best to do that? Pierre Poilievre. They don't think Justin Trudeau. So that's telling. Then they were asked to, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like these leaders? Well, Trump was a 3 out of 10. Trudeau was 3.6. Biden was 4.9. And I believe Poilievre was 5.1. So Poilievre is far more popular than Trudeau is. And Trudeau's closer to Donald Trump in popularity with Canadians than he is to Poilievre. So, this bizarre attempt to try and flail around and link him doesn't appear to be working. About 40% of Canadians think there's some similarities. About a third, so 33%, don't think there are. And the rest say, well, I don't know. So they've got their work cut out for them. But, the real issue for the Liberals is Canadians don't like Justin Trudeau anymore. As happens with every politician, they've had their time with him. They're done.
The public inquiry into foreign interference is opening, and it's creating a fuss with more than just the Conservative Party questioning who is standing and who is not. Let's talk more about that.
Yeah, a coalition of human rights groups, including those that represent Chinese Canadians and those who represent Uyghurs, of course, the Turkic Muslim minority that's being persecuted by China. They say, look, we're not comfortable with this. Some of them are talking about withdrawing from the inquiry at all. The head of the Uyghur Association said they're very uncomfortable with the fact that Michael Chan, former Ontario Liberal cabinet minister, who has, there's long been claims of deep ties between him and the government in Beijing. Han Dong, who was the Liberal MP who had to leave the caucus over allegations that he received help from the Chinese consulate to win his nomination, if not the election, he's been given standing, which means that they can both cross-examine these groups and also Senator Pugh, who they're saying this guy is, they view him as an agent or a mouthpiece of China, and for that reason they say we don't feel comfortable being cross-examined by him and these others. Meanwhile, the Conservatives have not been given standing. They don't get to cross-examine witnesses. They don't get to see all of the evidence, and the judge in this case, Justice Hogue, has said to warn the Conservatives, if you complain too much, I'll take away what little standing you do have before the commission. So it's not off to a good start. It looks like it's politics from the beginning. And, she said at the opening, I'm here to uncover the truth. Well, are you uncovering the whole truth or part of the truth and leaving other doors unopened? That's my big worry, but we'll have to wait and see and hold our own judgment until then. She may surprise us, but we'll see.
Ryan, the last time we chatted, you were in Israel. Not only did you have a chance to see the kibbutz where Hamas attacked on October the 7th, but you also stopped by a few religious sites, including where Jesus was crucified. What was that like for you?
It was amazing, Hal. We got to tour Jerusalem for a few hours on our final day there, in between briefings with politicians, including the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, on how they were handling the South Africa genocide appeal before the International Court. So in the middle of all that, it's like, okay, you've got some time. We went to a couple of places, the Western Wall, where, of course, that's the retaining wall for the Second Temple. Was able to go up and pray there. That was an incredibly moving experience. Was able to go and pray at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That current building, I believe it's from the 13th century. It replaced a building from the 3rd century. This is the location where they've long believed, because followers of Christ have been praying there since shortly after he was crucified and buried. This is the site of the crucifixion. This is Golgotha. And in fact, there's a spot upstairs where you can see the bedrock that was Golgotha, where they would mount the crosses and you can reach through and touch the stone. That was incredibly moving. You can go into the tomb and pray at the tomb. Uh, all of these things, much of the church was under renovation and reconstruction. It's old. I'll be honest, it's not all that fancy, but it's from the 13th century and it sees a lot of wear and tear over the years. But it was an incredibly moving experience for me as a Christian and as a Catholic to be there. But I'll tell you, I was there with people who were not religious as well, and they found it incredibly moving. One was he described himself as a lapsed Anglican, not really believing. Found it incredibly moving. And another one of my colleagues who was there was raised in a Sikh household, but not religious, and just kept talking about how incredibly moving this experience was. So, after all the horrible things that I saw and experienced, it was a bit of a cleansing moment, a bit of a renewal of the spirit to be able to go in and see these things that you've read about your whole life. But, for me anyways, I'd never been, so I'd never seen, and didn't realize that all these sites were, encapsulated in a church that was built around them, called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And all the, many different Christian denominations act as guardians in concert together. They sometimes fight, the different denominations, over who's in charge of what. But it was quite the experience, and I'd recommend it to any of your viewers if you're in Jerusalem to go see these sites.
Yeah, it's on my bucket list as well. Crucified, buried in the tomb, but rose again. Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.